Good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for attending the keynote address and the keynote luncheon. We're happy to have you here this afternoon. I trust that your morning sessions went very well. I did have an opportunity to sit in on a couple of sessions and found the discussions and the exchanges between the attendees and the discussants and the panelists and the authors to be very interesting and to include challenging remarks and a lot of solutions for problems or challenges that we're facing on different campuses, but also a lot of insight and research as a result of the scholarship of teaching and learning that's being presented here. So I wanted to thank you all for that. Before we get to the keynote address by Dr. Michael Brintnall, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the recipient of the 2013 CQ Press Award for Teaching Innovation. And I'll just briefly read a little bit about Professor Brian Harwood, who is the 2013 recipient. And if Brian is in the room, if I would like for him to kind of step forward as I am reading this. Great. Hi, Brian. Professor Brian M. Harwood of Allegheny College was recognized for his careful implementation of a campus partnership with an external archive and a research center. As the director of the campus partnership with the Robert H. Jackson Center, Harwood has created a model of service learning in which the relationship is not only embedded into specific courses, but also within a departmental curriculum and also within the campus mission. This innovative approach demonstrates how faculty and campuses can expose students to experiential learning and service learning opportunities and also reinforce curricular priorities and desired proficiencies, as well as provide essential skill experience while meeting the needs of external organizations. So we are very pleased this afternoon to award the 2013 CQ Press Award for Teaching Innovation to Professor Brian Harwood. Please join me in congratulating Brian. Thank you, Brian. At this time, I'd like to introduce Candy Young, who is the chair of the TLC Programming Committee. Candy and the committee worked very diligently over selecting not only the theme for this year's meeting, which is, again, the 10th anniversary conference, but also the keynote address. And they were very thoughtful in their considerations. And I'm sure that you will agree that their choice was the best choice, and we look forward to the keynote address. So, Candy.
Thanks to Kim. It's really Kim who is the glue here at this conference, so we really appreciate all you do. She is right that when we talked about who we would like to see as a keynote speaker, Michael seemed to be the obvious choice, though there were a lot of great suggestions, and we had our little process, and he came out as the top choice of the group by a long shot. So I want to take the chance to introduce him here. Dr. Michael Brintnall has served this discipline in many capacities since earning his PhD at MIT. He has had faculty appointments at Brown University and Mount Vernon College, where he also served as VPAA. He was a research analyst and the Director of Economic Development Program Evaluation Office at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and Executive Director of the National Association of Schools of Public Affairs and Administration. He became the Executive Director of APSA in 2002. In his first Executive Director report in 2002, he mentions a plan to create a TLC. And in 2003, the next year, one of APSA's goals was to strengthen teaching and education within APSA. In 2004, the TLC was born. Over the years, he has supported the conference, even though it's always in the red. Tough thing to do. He challenged the organization to make teaching one of the highest priorities for the discipline. Moreover, he has worked with many to give those in the discipline whose primary passion and professional responsibility is to teach and structure student learning a sense of belonging and legitimacy within the association. He has elevated SOTL through the creation of a new journal, Teaching and Learning in Political Science, and in 2004. The APSA Distinguished Teaching Award was added to the association in 2011. Perhaps the most important thing, though, is that he has facilitated the development of a large group of previously quiet political scientists to have a stronger voice in the discipline. We are pleased to have Michael Brintnall as our 2013 TLC Keynote Speaker.
Well, thank you very much. I think of myself somewhat as the stage manager and not as somebody up here in front. So it's unusual, but an honor to be able to speak a little bit. As you know, this is a bit of a swan song, and I think the swan song is often a bit of a tell-all. And I was trying to think what it is that you really might want to know about how it all works in the background. But as I thought about what would be most important to say, it's to do just what we've been doing all along here, and that is to talk more about teaching and learning in political science. So I want to talk a bit more about some of that and to pose the next, what I think is the next generation of challenge for us. And I can't think of a better group within the discipline to do that with. This has been one of the priorities for me, and one of the things that I am proudest of in the time that I've been with APSA, that we've been able to move this conference forward and to build this community. So it's probably worth telling you a little bit about why I think that's the case. You know, teaching and learning matters a lot, and it matters for a bunch of reasons. One of them certainly is the way in which we change students. And there's no question about that, and we've heard eloquent discussion. Jenny Mansbridge talking about her experiences. First thing she wanted to tell you as she stood up here was her experience with students, and that's the case with everyone, and that's important. But there's a lot more to it, and that's the key thing, and what we need to keep recognizing. There is engagement. Right now, one of the strongest themes and certainly in the APSA office is how we start to do a better job of dealing with the relation between political science and the external world. Get people to understand what we do and further to benefit from what we do. When we talk about starting blogs, and we talk about better Facebook pages, and we talk about Twitter and those things. But in fact, the point where our engagement is the strongest is through our teaching, and the placing of students as citizens, and the placing of students as policymakers, and the placing of students as advisors. I might say that with Representative Flake notwithstanding. He's the one who proposed eliminating funding from the National Science Foundation while at the same time holding a master's degree in political science. But even he spoke positively of political science. He was just worried about the money. So we made some progress there, and perhaps we can make more as senator. Certainly, as we've been hearing, one of the themes that's important is subject matter. Politics is one of the distinctive things that defines us as being human. And our discipline can approach this subject matter in a way that is remarkably comprehensive. Some have called it the rainbow discipline, that we can draw on normative approaches, we can draw on behavioral and empirical approaches and so on, and bring these together in ways that matter for human conduct. And we do this through our teaching in ways that are profound. And the fourth way that I would say teaching is important is that it's the basis for our authority. It is teaching that really underpins and grounds academic freedom. We don't earn academic freedom as scholars because we're smart. And we don't earn it because we want to do studies that we think are important. We earn it because we've worked a deal in society that we will, with integrity, based on peer review and the like, we will help to transmit values to the next generation in a way that is more preferable than any other way a society can find. There is no academic freedom in a think tank. You know, think about this a little bit. You know, There's no academic freedom at Brookings. It's a wonderful place. We know the values will be high, but they'll be high because they're shared values, not because there's any legal commitment to academic freedom. The academic freedom exists because we teach. And then this teaching is integrally related with our scholarship. So all the time that you've thought, you know, the priority is scholarship and teaching's on the side, it's really the other way around. It's teaching that grounds what we do, and then the scholarship is linked to that and gains us the authority in our speech. So if this is so important, I want to see how we link teaching in a broader sense to our sense of the discipline. And so here I want to talk a little bit, not about the classroom, and we do a great job in the classroom, and a stunningly good job in the classroom across everything that we do, and in any of the conversations you've heard, you know that. And I'm not concerned about the methodologies that we express in the classroom, though believe me, if you want to tell all, an awful lot of my time is spent in this job dealing with different people's views about methodologies and how they ought to be represented or not represented or so on. And ways of knowing are certainly important in what we do. And I'm not concerned about the pedagogy in the classroom because, again, I think we're making huge progress in talking about that and reflecting on that and so on. Lectures or simulations, should it be PowerPoint? Sorry, didn't do one. Active learning or passive learning. But I should probably also reveal to you that the reason that I am standing here is because of a simulation. In 1965, I have to go back and check my own notes just to remind myself that's that far back. In 1965, I sat in an urban politics simulation that Phil Calder taught at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and it changed my whole outlook on what I wanted to do and how I wanted to think about things in a course that's in a simulation that I still think about and reflect upon the choices that I made in that and why I had made them and what it was telling me. It gave me insight into not only how to think about problem solving, but also what problems were important. So while I don't want to talk about pedagogy in the classroom, I was from that moment on convinced about the value of pedagogy in the classroom. What I want to talk about instead is curriculum. And I want to talk about curriculum in the very expansive sense. What is the total body of knowledge that we really want our students to have? And how do we begin to think collectively about that larger task beyond just the preponderance of talk that we give to what we do within the classroom itself? APSA has not much attended to the question of curriculum. There have been studies. How many of you can think of an APSA document that deals with curriculum? What comes to your mind? The Walke Report. Anybody know when it was written? It was 1991. 1991 is the last time that we really had a comprehensive look at curriculum, and it was not an APSA report. It was actually the American Association of Colleges that sponsored that across a number of disciplines. The group that worked on it was named by Lucian Pye. Now, I want to mention that because Lucian Pye was my first graduate school advisor. And in my naivete, I went to MIT and expected to meet a small Asian man. He did study China, after all. He was a very tall Nordic man instead. But, so that right off the bat taught me not to start with presuppositions. It was Twiley Barker, Lawrence Beer, Mary Ellen Fisher, Ron Kahn, Kathleen McGinnis, Marianne Leaf Paley, Randall Ripley, John Walke, Richard Brody, and Lois Moreland. It's worth looking at. It's in PS, 1991. You can find this on JSTOR, volume 24, March, page 48. It said a lot of really interesting things. For example, one of the things it said is that the American government classes should be taught as a comparative politics class. We made a lot of progress on that one since 1991. So it's worth taking a look at. Now, we have had some additional probes into questions of curriculum. The Graduate Education Report in 2002 is also worth looking at. This emerged out of real disputes about what are the directions of doctoral education. Is it becoming too parochial or narrow? Theda Scotchpole appointed this group in 2002 to assess the current condition, problems, and options for improvements in political science graduate education. Chris Aiken, Christina Beltran, Kathy Cohen, David Collier, Edie Goldenberg, Bob Kahane, Kristen Monroe, Roger Smith, Michael Wallerstein. It articulated, this was a fascinating group to be involved with, I'll tell you, behind closed doors sorts of things. And this group came very close to dividing and deciding they could not write a single report about graduate education in the United States. And one of these people, I won't name names, but one of these people in that group, as they're about to decide to say we can't come together, just stood up and scratched his head or her head, and said, you know, we agree on a couple of things. And one of the things we agreed on is that politics is of fundamental importance to human behavior, and from that we ought to find some common ground. And everybody sat back down and came out with a report that articulated those values, and they're important ones for us. Now, it didn't go forward to say, what do we do? How do we do it? But they agreed that we, political scientists must affirm that the complex subject matter of politics must be studied using many methods. Studies of ethical norms and normative commitments, including those in our own work, are central to the study of politics. The discipline must address a diverse range of long-neglected subjects, including the political experience of traditionally marginal groups. Political scientists should be able to communicate clearly. There's an important one. And finally, we share the view that a serious graduate education includes a broadly informed perspective on the discipline. So a recognition that we needed to take advantage of the breadth of our approaches and train ourselves across them. But that's as far as we got with this. The next step is the 21st Century Task Force report, named by Diane Pinderhughes, Luis Fraga, and Terry Givens, reminding us that the student bodies and the issues that we're facing are changing much more rapidly than we appear to be. We don't know if we're catching up because we haven't been looking at these questions. And we need to prepare curriculum for the future. So we've had one solid look at curriculum, and we've had reminders of its importance, but we haven't moved forward collectively within the discipline to answer these questions. So I've tried to figure out why. And it occurs to me that we are guided by three muses in political science. And we listen to all of them, but we haven't been listening to all of them as fully as we should. And these three muses may surprise you a little bit, but the ones that came to mind for me are Jerzy Kosinski, Michael Oakside, and the Perestroika movement. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a three-sided perspective of how I see the discipline from those, and see if we can't then integrate the thinking across these three to get a better understanding of where we might go with curriculum. Now, Jerzy Kosinski, as you may know, is a Polish author, wrote The Painted Bird, lived and in the book describes the experience of wandering through wartime Poland and the Holocaust. What isn't much known is that he was a political scientist. He was born Joseph Lubenkow in Lodz, Poland. Actually survived under a false identity in a Roman Catholic family. He was Jewish, but in a Roman Catholic family in Poland. Well, the account in the novel is often thought to be autobiographical. It isn't, but certainly close to experiences that he observed. He earned degrees in history and political science in Poland, and then came to the United States and got advanced degrees. I'm stretching a little bit because his advanced degree was in sociology, but close enough for these purposes. There was no sociology at MIT, by the way, when I was there, so I always just assumed it's part of political science. And, I graduated from Columbia after 57. He came in 57 with an advanced degree in political science. He is the colorful, expressive artist. For me, he's the muse that stands for the political scientist who captivates students, who with his storytelling can embed with us a concern and understanding of the values that are important, that are grounded in compelling issues. The romantic image, the lone wolf intellectual, the public intellectual in some sense. Now, The Painted Bird was accepted by his publisher, who thought it was autobiographical. It wasn't. He was to some extent a deceitful man as well, but deceitful for educational purposes and for instructive purposes. If you remember the story about the painted bird, in one of the villages, this little boy wanders to the locals would take an ordinary bird, and there was a game in which they would tie colored feathers onto onto this bird and release it, and the other birds would then see this, what appeared to be strange bird, even though it was in fact one of their own, and attack it and kill it. And of course, there you can extend this as a way of understanding some of what was happening within Europe at the time. In a sense, it's what's happened to Kaczynski. You know, he painted himself in gaudy colors and then, in effect, destroyed himself, committed suicide. So I'm really pushing this here in the sense of this muse, but there is this side of political science, and I feel this in some sense in our work. In some ways, the model is very difficult because we have members who, and an ethos in this discipline in which people want to really highlight the individualistic expression of political science outside of the context of sort of the supporting discipline, outside of the norms that control the temptation to deceive in order to enhance storytelling, outside of the accountability of the profession itself. So we romanticize the individual scholar, but that's not where our strength through our autonomy comes from, and we need more than that. So to find more than that, I turn to Michael Oakside. Now, Michael Oakside is a British political philosopher. He's something of a strange choice here as well, because to him, social science is a disaster. It's the corruption of humanistic values. There is no social we. There is only the I. In Michael Oakside's perspectives. And this again is reaction to sort of socializing tendencies that he was observing within the UK and within European politics. To substitute the word social for the word human, he said, is to surrender to confusion. Human conduct is never merely a subscription to a practice or to a relationship, but there's no such thing as an unconditional social relationship. So here we are, individuals, and we have to approach things individualistically, but he also recognized we have to solve problems and that we have to be able to speak expressively. And his solution to this was the college, the university in its purest sense. Scholars coming together and speaking and accountable to each other collectively, even as they're operating individualistically. College becomes sort of this middle ground between individualistic expression and its protection. And for the college, I think for our purposes, we can think the department. So our second muse, if Kaczynski speaks to the individual lecturer and teacher, Oakside is talking to us about our responsibilities collectively as academic departments and how we can problem solve together. A university, so I'm going to say department in his words, a university is an association of persons locally situated, engaged in caring for and attending to the whole intellectual capital which comprises a civilization. Pretty heady sets of responsibilities. This gives us, in my view, a much better grounding for how we start to think about the definition of curriculum. And the problem is that the world is getting past us. And Oakshott department itself isn't going to solve the problems that we need. We can't assume that departments, because the problems are escaping us, students are escaping us. I was in an accreditation task force set of meetings talking about how regional accreditation can start to respond to some of the critics about the qualities of higher education. And the provost of one of the Ivy League institutions said that he didn't really think we needed assessment standards because his university, sorry again it's a his university accepts accountability for students from the beginning to the end, and that they're responsible for assuring this educational dynamic. And the president of the Bunker Hill Community College just burst out laughing. And she said, that assumes that your students will stay there. Said, but the reality of education is I have students who come in for one course, they go out for 2 years, then they come back for 3 more, then they take one somewhere else, then they get one online. There is no way that we in any way can understand comprehensively within the framework of our institution what the educational process that the student got. The world has taken students away from departments. Courses are dislocating from departments. We had the conversation last night about MOOCs. Now suddenly what's happening is courses are going online and we can see where this is headed. Students will now start pulling a course from here and pulling a course from there. And the challenge, they're not going to get their education by working through a departmental sequence of courses. They're going to get it by cobbling together bits of information. And we need to be prepared for understanding. And the focus will be on the caliber of those courses. You know, there's going to be a Jerzy Kosinski standing at each one of those courses on the screen just making everybody think this is the coolest thing. But there won't be any process for assuring how that education is integrated with the other things they learn to give the well-rounded sense of curriculum. And careers are dislocating from departments. We know this, and I don't need to go into this at some length, except that there's a piece of the increasing reliance on adjuncts, on contingent faculty, on increasingly mobile faculty that I don't think we attend to enough, and that is that it's reflecting an increasing university disinvestment in faculty. It used to be if you entered through the original track, yeah, it was tough, and you might not make it, and you might be mad if you didn't make it and so on, but the assumption was if you made it and you hewed the line and really were productive, that that institution would then invest in your career for the rest of your life. And now universities are starting to shed that responsibility for investment. They'll say, yeah, we'll bring you in, we might even start to pay better for adjuncts and so on, but how you develop your own professional record is on your own. There's no sabbaticals, there's no support for getting to meetings and so on. So that the problem of managing careers is now starting to move outside of departments as well. So yes, departments are really important, and I'm not disclaiming this at all, and that's where I think the core of intellectual thinking is, but Oakside no longer really gives us the answer either. So where do we turn next? To the perestroika movement. Now this is the political science, not the Russian perestroika movement, in case you didn't know. And you might, this is also probably an odd choice for me to include in this. It certainly has been a difficult part of some of the things I've had to deal with. And I have some real disagreements with the perestroika movement. I believe that the fact that the P list operated anonymously is I'll choose my words carefully, unseemly. I understand the reasons why it would operate unanimously, but it gave the sense that this was more a matter of intrigue than it was of really of reform. I think it was a self-absorbed movement. This was more about people feeling disrespected than about really wanting to accomplish some focused goal. And there was some absence of value. I thought of perestroika a little bit as the Seinfeld of disciplinary reform. You know, it wasn't really about anything. And I say this in reference to the Caucus for New Political Science, for example. Go back and look in the late 1960s at the Caucus for New Political Science. What it was about things. It was about that we needed to be talking about civil rights, and we needed to be talking about nuclear proliferation, and we needed to be talking about poverty. And we didn't find this within the perestroika movement except at a sort of a second order range. But ironically, for having a flavor of kind of tearing down the ramparts of the discipline, perestroika was really about making them work. This is what's intriguing to me. The perestroika movement saw the structure of the discipline itself. It was about journals and about selection and gatekeeping within the journals and getting them out. It was about the way in which people are trained and enter the discipline through choice of dissertations. It was about association leadership and how people are selected to be standing up here. In this sense, the perestroika movement understood that this phrase I use, that political science is not what political scientists do. That there is something beyond what each of us does individually that really structures what the overall effect of this work is. And the perestroika movement, oddly enough, understood that better than any other dynamic within the discipline and really talked about the discipline and the way it's structured and the way in which it shaped things that came out of it. So there's a powerful understanding that has emerged from that has in fact led to changes in structures that I think have been very constructive and productive in the discipline, and we can learn something about that. So how do we take Jerzy Kosinski and Michael Oakside and the perestroika movement and sort of bring all these together? And that's what I want to leave you with as the next challenge. I think now is the time in which we need a more engaged discipline, and we need to start acting with a disciplinary voice about curriculum. And there are a few ways that we can do this, though I'm not sure I can fully even begin to understand what those steps are, and I certainly wish my successor well in leading some of those changes. We need to talk about framing curriculum. We can't leave this just to departments and individual faculty. We need to start to say, these are the expectations about what a well-educated student of political science is, whatever kind of student that is, that reaches beyond any one department, because they're not going to be in any one department. They're going to be pulling this from various places. We certainly need to broaden assessment in that direction, and we're starting to do that. The energy from assessment of the course is now starting to shift towards assessment of programs. We need to think about ways of assessing learning that cuts across departments. Portfolios may be the answer for this. And one step we could start to take is to frame the discipline-wide, what would be the characteristics of a portfolio of learning about political science that a student might, in some literal or less specific way, carry with them as they went across this journey of learning from political science. Improving transfer agreements certainly is something, or this could be addressed more practically. We need to think of ways of faculty development that are not reliant on departments and universities, and this may be a major role for these. In fact, this is what this conference is in some sense, is a commitment to faculty development that reaches outside. You know, departments could be sending of each of you to some learning conference about it, and they probably do in some sense. But to be able to build this as a disciplinary component, we need to come together, and that's one of the objectives here. We need better collaboration between the disciplinary associations and the higher education associations. There's virtually no contact between APSA and AAU except when we lobby on something that funds us both. And there needs to be a lot more talk. I've been in sessions where there were provosts, we were talking about internationalizing the curriculum. There were provosts in some of the disciplinary associations, and the provost said, what are you all doing here? You don't have anything to do with this. And the answer, fortunately, in this case, from one person at ACU was, well, when presidents tell the faculty to do something, not so much happens. When the disciplinary associations say, yeah, this is the way our discipline needs to move, things start to change. So we need to build on that collaboration with higher education. So I think the next big challenge for APSA is to begin a process of the comprehensive discussion of curriculum in political science in the expansive sense that it's now reaching beyond the individual teacher, it's reaching beyond the academic department to become a part of our collective responsibilities as a discipline to continue to ground this disciplinary support. And what I'm very pleased to think is that it's begun here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Michael has graciously offered to take questions or engage in discussion on his comments. So if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to have them now.
There's about 10 years ago, when this conference started, the association also established a committee on teaching and learning, which is, there have been them in the past, but made this a standing committee, and a separate one on civic engagement. And those are groups that are really focused on these questions, and one place is to start to identify those leaders and talk there. The section is another place, and to be active in the section and to move that forward. I think where a lot of the energy needs to also come, and one of the things that's very pleasing and surprising to me about this conference is with department chairs. The APSA has an active departmental services program, and department chairs, even though, as I say, issues are moving beyond, it's not, the departments are still going to be the central place for thinking about these issues. And so talking to your own chair about staying engaged with the APSA departmental services program and pushing this discussion at that level is a way to do it. Hi.
there are 13,000 other political scientists out there who didn't hear the speech, and they're the ones, unfortunately, perhaps, that need to hear your muses and your perspective on the changes we're all going to be facing. How do we get these words that you just spoke to us, which that I think many of us are on board on, with the rest of the folks at APSA and political science in general?
Yeah. I mean, one of our goals with this conference is it's not a conference where we think everybody will come every year, the way the annual meeting functions as a meeting ground, but I'm hoping it's a place where a lot of people cycle through sometime. And so encouraging colleagues to come here is one step on that. As I say, we can try to organize this discussion at other levels, and I think that's starting to happen with departments through the section and so on. And some of it is talking it up in your own departments. Writing for PS, writing about this in the Journal of Political Science Education, and then sharing those articles. Yeah. Well, of course, the first step is for the Midwest to invite this speech. The Midwest is what am I saying? The Midwest is the one of the other associations, the only one of the other associations that routinely does not have the APSA president speak there. So whether I would even get in on second tier, I'm not sure. But would be happy to have continuing discussions, of course. Yes. Now, NASPA, as you know, accredits the Master's of Public Administration degree, and so has quite explicitly framed standards about what should be in the curriculum, about the composition of the faculty, resources, and so on. I'm not recommending that as the approach for this, and I don't think it's the right answer for a broader discipline. NASPA is producing students that are intended for a very specific job structure in which the market needs to be able to know, yeah, this student knows how to do this and this and that and the other thing. And that's a very important role. That's different from here. But there are things we can learn about from that. And NASPA didn't start with accreditation. NASPA started with a set of not remembering the word, but they weren't standards, but they were agreed upon principles. And departments would say, oh, we understand. Our department would certify that we understand these principles, we've thought about these principles, we're reflecting on these principles, we're making our own judgments about these principles. And that's something we might be able to do in certain contexts, maybe smaller ways rather than larger ways, but that's a start. Yes. Yeah. But yeah, no, I understand, and I'm well aware of that, and the presidents are onto that too at the university levels, and they're not going to let it happen again. It's pretty clear. Yeah. Yeah. Just to reinforce the importance of that question, I'll give you one anecdote that Bob Putnam has reported, and I think this is in print now. research by one of his students of our effect on high school education and civics that speaks to this general theme. That the claim in this research is that the early focus in the high school curriculum used to be on civics. It was, here's how you participate, here's how you go to the polls, here's how you do the practical things. And as the political science community entered that picture, we started to propose high school level textbooks that taught how to understand politics. How do you do the analysis? How do you do the research? Ideas that we really felt were important ones for having sort of the broad perspective on the world, but there's some indication that that may have in fact undercut the understanding of the actual practical exercise of politics. Students were now, either weren't getting that more practical education, so they didn't think to go to the polls, or they became so conflicted, as one might always be, by trying to analyze stuff that you then get cross-pressured into not knowing how to act. So there is a tension, for sure, between our responsibilities and, or at least our potential for providing civic guidance in the educational process and our helping to teach the kind of critical thinking and then analysis and understanding that many of us also think is important. I don't have the answer to that, and I think it's an answer that we have to find sort of, it's a craft answer is the best I could say, and we need to just work hard on it as we go forward, because it's important we do both. John.
I'm interested in your choice of Muses, and that they're all to be seen as sort of outside of and maybe opposed to the mainstream discipline. And I wonder what the message is. Is this the mainstream so strong it doesn't need a muse?
No, I don't feel that the mainstream is excluded from those muses. I think it's excluded from the Jerzy Kosinski, but not necessarily, because what that stands for is the decorated person standing up there, and you can be decorated and still be a rational theorist, rational choice theorist doing equations on the board. The Oaksidean department, I think, is inclusive in that sense. So I don't mean to exclude from his sense of what the department, what the collectivity would be of people viewing the world from a behavioral approach or from a normative approach or like, nor do I think he would. So no, I don't mean to exclude them at all, what one would think of as the mainstream in this. Nor, as I say, and as I described the perestroika dispute, I think what the lesson from perestroika that was important was not that we have to stop doing one kind of work in order to do another, but rather we need to be sensitive to the fact that when we structure the discipline, we are that makes choices for us, and we want to be able to be inclusive with all of those choices. And we weren't being attentive to the fact that it made choices for us. We were, because there was a sort of a mainstream view that said, hey, these choices feel good to us, so we don't have to be sensitive to why the choices are being made. But that was the lesson from that, and that part was important. The way we got there was kind of messy and I think unfortunate, but I value that lesson both for the mainstream and for the groups that felt they were outside. One more? Yes. Yeah.
What would you say to the young political science major who says, well, I think I want to go to graduate school and enter the profession? What sort of advice would you give?
I would say go for it first, because it's just an incredibly good and interesting profession. And I would say keep in mind that there are a lot of different ways to being a political scientist. And if they had some time, I'd chat, because I've tried to do most of them, as it turns out. And if you think about it, and there is, I would say also, be shrewd about how you stage those different things that you do, but prepare for doing it in a way that allows for a lot of variety in the discipline, and go for it. I have no regrets at all. I mean, it's been a long and complicated sequence of steps in my career, but they've all been wonderful, and I'm just stunned to look at this room full of people. I'll tell you that they're just so engaged in these kinds of things that I think are important. That I feel very rewarded by all those choices. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for those very thoughtful remarks. And just on a personal note, I would also like to thank Michael for his vision for creating the Teaching and Learning Conference, but more broadly, the contextual dialogue that we're engaged in now. And speaking from a staff perspective, Michael's working tirelessly to make sure that this conference is what it is and that it's comprised of you. And we all understand that the conference wouldn't be as important or interesting or exciting or challenging as it is were it not for you. So I just want to thank you, but also thank Michael for all of his efforts and his vision. Thank you.